there have been allegations of that you can probably guess if I think they're true, about a baby being microwaved that was repeated by Tammy Bruce, I believe. And I think you said that on a show that you appeared on. Do you have any updates about that claim?
Yeah, so on Breaking Points, I was talking about that, and what's important about that statement is that yes, that's been debunked, that is not true. Conveying that in the approach that Israel, the IDF, take, because in this conflict, what's going on right now, narratives have become very popular or very powerful. Well, they've always been, but in this case, the narrative of dehumanization, to use a bombastic, overblown narrative to justify the dehumanization of the entire population of Gaza, to say that Hamas did this, it was so bad that everybody deserves to be punished, and look how bad it was. And what's worse than saying something like that? You know, when Israelis go to Kibbutz Be'eri, which was hit outside of Gate 96, to get a tour of it, that's one of the things that they're told. It's kind of like when I was growing up in Texas and we went to the Alamo every year, we were told that the Texans won, right? And you grow up and you're like, well, that's not true. Like, it didn't happen.
Right.
So it's kind of like you get told these things and you realize that's not true.
Yeah.
It's a narrative that's specifically designed to incite anger and hate and visceral hate. So in Israel, there's an overlook over Gaza that's kind of a elevated area on the Israeli side, on a knoll, on a tell, if you will, and you can take a picture with Gaza in the background burning, bombs dropping. It's a tourist spot to take a picture, to celebrate. This is not how civilized societies behave. This is not how civilized societies act. Yes, there's hatred, and yes, there's anger, and yes, lives on October 7th and before on both sides have been hurt. Regardless of it, it doesn't justify genocide. It doesn't justify in fact, whenever politicians say it, I tell myself, I'm like, you just on the record, verbatim, described a war crime. To characterize the entire population, of a group or a nation or a nation state or a population as the enemy and treat them as such is a war crime. It's specifically in the protocols of the Geneva Convention. You can't do that, and then you can't persecute a war where you are systematically doing that. And that is exactly what they're doing. As Greg was saying, in Iraq and Afghanistan, collateral damage assessments, collateral damage analysis, CDA, CDEs, to determine if I drop this bomb here and it's going to blow up this much, based on the value of the target, so to speak, is, in the civilian damage that can occur around it in association with the level of the target. These things have to get blessed off on by very high-ranking officers, general officers, sometimes all the way to the SecDef, depending on how sensitive it is. Not in Gaza. I have witnessed with my own eyes being in Rafah at night on a distribution site and just watching the bombs drop all night on neighborhoods and areas that are designated for civilians. The level of just dehumanizing the population, the things that the Israelis call the Palestinians the zombies, the horde, the animals. It's right out of the playbook. It's right out of the how to be a dictator, how to commit genocide playbook. Dehumanize the population, spread narratives that justify your anger towards that population. Continue to do it in plain sight. They're not even hiding it. Do it in plain sight to where the world becomes tempered to it. It's like the frog in the boiling water.
Right.
We have all been sitting in this boiling water for so long that we now don't even realize from whence we came, of how far we've gotten off track of allowing these atrocities. Because if the United States or any of our allies were doing this in Afghanistan or Iraq, the world would have condemned us months ago.
Sorry to interject. I just wanted to add one thing to that. I just looked up this piece in the Irish Times, and I don't know if there's more than one viewing point, but it said that at this particular one, they actually installed vending machines so that people could
Yeah.
buy refreshments. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just wondering if you recalled back in 2015 when the U.S. Air Force dropped the Doctors Without Borders hospital in Kunduz province. It was this massive international incident. There may have been a cover-up. There was a lot of PR cover, and there was a reevaluation.
That was first Battalion, 3rd Special Forces Group. I was there, and I was in that battalion, so I remember it very well.
Okay, well, there you go. It wasn't normalized. It wasn't something that just happened. And now I talk a lot about this, how warfare is kind of like law. When you set precedents, it's really hard to unset them. So it's now the world is a lot less safe. Global security is degraded because now we've normalized a state policy of bombing hospitals or destroying hospitals or sending forces into hospitals and raiding hospitals without any look. If there are fighters in the hospitals, they haven't provided any SSC or proof.
What is that? Sorry.
Sensitive
site exploitation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Evidence?
Like photos,
Yeah.
evidence, stuff like that. Along with weapons caches that were supposed to be there, tunnels.
Also,
whatever.
you're still not allowed to. I mean, this is important to note that there are so many layers of dishonesty and dehumanization because 1, they don't provide the evidence for it. But 2, even if they did have that, you're not allowed to unless it's like an active site where people are actively attacking. You can't just say that they've been there or they use this space. So like they also don't follow. They always are pretending. Israel is always pretending to follow international humanitarian law, and they don't. So even if there's evidence of that, it's not defensible.
When I've been tracking their narrative, that they've been used to justify these combat actions since the beginning. And at first they had the pretense that they were fighting a counterinsurgency, and they'd use as a reference U.S. coin doctrine, which is kind of a controversial doctrine within U.S. military circles. That was kind of what we were doing during the global war on terror. We're fighting a counterinsurgency. And what I started to use as a talking point was one of the foundations of it was something called SWET MSO, sewage, water, electricity, academics, trash, medical, safety, and others. And if it was the basic premise was if you're fighting a counterinsurgency and you want to mitigate the amount of people who essentially want to kill you, you basically try to do whatever you can to maintain the functions of normal modern life, because it may dissuade a guy from picking up an AK if, there's some sense of normalcy. So like in Iraq, I know we sent in contractors to fix dams, stuff like that. But just doing like an open source analysis on the opening days of the quote unquote invasion, they were intentionally targeting all of that civilian infrastructure.
Right. So I just want to return to what we just were talking about. So you acknowledge that was and I'm not very good at doing this. I'm not good at pushing back on guests, but you acknowledge that isn't true, right? The thing about
yes, no, I acknowledge and I know that is not true.
How did you? I'm just curious. How did you hear about it, and then how did you hear it wasn't true?
So how did I hear about it? Was that in going to Israel when we first got this contract? We first got there, and we were in Israel, and I felt I wanted to better understand October 7th through the lens of both from Gaza and from Israel. You read it in the news, you judge it from an ocean away. I wanted to understand. And when you go to the kibbutz and they're giving you a tour of the different areas, that's one of the stops, so to speak, on the tour where they take you and they show you that this is where that happened. And when I was there, that was the first that I had ever heard about that. Again, I don't have any social media. I really keep to myself a lot. So I knew of the events. I didn't know of those details. And they had said that, and I was kind of shocked by it.
Well, right, because that's what they do is and we've seen this very clearly weaponized, right? And this is called like atrocity propaganda, because when you hear something that's very like blood curdling, it kind of, it like skips the brain, right? It's like, it's on your lizard senses or whatever. And that is supposed to make you, I think, just accept whatever Israel's doing. I mean, I think that's why. And a lot of people point this out, like, there were things that were done on October 7th that were terrible. I mean, I don't think you have to both sides things or pretend that
Sure.
resistance isn't legal under international law, but there's a difference between killing combatants and civilians. But there's no need to make these things up, right? But they do
Yeah.
make these things up because they want them to be as gruesome as possible. So when did you learn that that hadn't happened?
Well, so after we had gone to the kibbutz, and I was at the time still in Beersheba. Went to Beersheba, and I was talking with someone that was also there on the contract. Their background was more State Department, and they had told me, they were like, that's not true, right? And I was like, what do you mean? They described it in such detail, and like they were so passionate. They were like, no. So they showed me all this information about it and how it wasn't, and I was like, man, that's a really powerful, impactful way to make someone angry, though. And if you don't have the desire or the wherewithal to go and know the truth behind that, and that's how narratives work. And the IDF and the Israelis, they are very good with narratives. They are very good with psychological warfare and narratives, and that is a very powerful thing. So yes, I know that did not happen, and that is not true. But the narrative of it is true. It's true that they have that in their narrative, what happened on October 7th, that they say that to spur that anger, almost in a way that that gives what they're doing in Gaza justification, because they'll go back to say, oh, well, look what happened on October 7th. It's like, okay, no one's denying that, but it doesn't mean that you can just go in and then violate every aspect of the Geneva Convention and international humanitarian law and just be and just do, have no constraint like that. One does not justify the other. So it's interesting to me how they use that narrative, that creepiness of, you blow up a school, you blow up a hospital, and the world says that's wrong, and they say, well, Hamas uses it. And to your point, as you said, Katie, it's like, well, they do, but they're not using it right now. It doesn't have military utility at this point. So you just committed a war crime. And everybody says, oh, well, they said that Hamas uses it, so they do. And then now they do it every day. They've done it to do it once, and now it's become normalized. I'm afraid what my grave concern is what becomes normalized to the end state. Are we just going to all stand back and watch as the entire population of Gaza is annihilated because we've just become tempered to it?
Right.
And we just temper ourselves into that end state? To me, that is so frightening, because it's possible. I mean, I cannot describe being physically in Gaza, and I've been in some places where I've seen destruction. Raqqa in Syria, Mosul in Iraq, during the first part of the first war, and when we went again in with ISIS. I've seen a lot of destruction. When I entered Gaza and crossed through the Karim Shalom entrance and past the kind of the warehouses, and you could actually have a view. It was morning and sun was rising over the enclave, and you could see the vast destructive wasteland. It was, my brain couldn't even bring it to comprehend the level of destruction. And I've seen a lot of destruction. It's beyond anything I've ever seen. And when Western journalism, or when the world has had enough and goes in to say, okay, we're tired of this secrecy, we want to go in, hey, we're going to look, we're going to take a look. And when we take a look, it's going to bring the world to its knees, how bad it is. And right now, what's really disturbing to me as an American is that we're complicit in it. And is it genocide? Yes. Is it starvation? Yes. Is there a famine? Yes. Are we side by side with the killing of women and children and the elderly? Yes. I've seen it with my own eyes. I have touched a child and looked into his eyes, and moments later he was dead. And anybody that says otherwise, I would say, well, were you there? Because I was. So yeah, it's real, and it concerns me as to where does it stop?
Right. And there is one thing I think often gets lost. Thinking, I of course am not going to apologize for U.S. actions overseas. I'm part of organizations that want to end that. But I was thinking about, all their claims and how they conduct themselves. I just remember spending the most formative years of my life in a organization called JSOC, Joint Special Operations Command. In Afghanistan, one of the preferred things to do was, if you could get a line on a guy out in the open and you could drone strike him, you would, because you don't have to risk operators sending them out into, territory that might have surface to air fire, and you're dealing with another extortion 1-7 incident. But if you couldn't, because they were in a civilian compound or a madrasa or some other, site that you weren't ever going to get clearance to drop, guess what? Night raid, send in special operations forces. But even since the beginning, I'm like, are they even conducting special operations? I think it looks, for me, just through open source analysis, I've never been on the ground there. Like, are they doing that? Because it seems like they're just dropping everything.
Oh no, they're destroying everything.
Yeah. That's something I just wanted to point out.
I once watched about 7 kilometers, maybe a little bit less, on a rising terrain off of site number 3. So down in the south, you have sites 1, 2, and 3. 3 is the furthest north of those, closest to Rafah, Khan Yunis, and they were conducting airstrikes that night. And I watched them hit the same building to the point to where it was turned into dust and rubble. And that's what when you speak with the IDF that are in Gaza, like their intent is annihilation. Their intent is to destroy the infrastructure, destroy like a great point you brought up is that when you're waging war, you don't want to destroy everything, because the intent is at the conclusion of war, there's the ability for civil population to then come back and you reestablish society. You don't sow the seeds of an insurgency. You don't destroy everything. We learned this in World War II, that after World War II, when we occupied Germany and some of the allies were like, we're destroying everything. The Soviets were like, we're going to destroy it all. And we were like, well, let's not, because let's not repeat what we did in World War I that caused World War II. Let's not do that again. It's not even in Israel's self-interest. They're just so focused on this right now that they're willing to bring everything and everybody with them. And it's gone so far beyond the point of any type of proportionality, specificity, targeting. There is none of that going on. It is systematically bombing areas until there's just nothing left. Think of carpet bombing in Vietnam, but at a slightly lesser mass scale, but it's just systematic instead of all at once. But that's about what it looks like.
I wanted to also ask about, I've heard claims that Israel is collaborating with others to steal aid to then claim Hamas is stealing aid. Do you know about this?
So I don't know about the particular steal claim, but this was something that did give me concern while we were there. Under the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation in Israel executing the delivery into Gaza, the IDF are in charge. There is zero gray area, and understand the IDF are in charge. They tell us, the contractors, they tell us where we're going to deliver, when we're going to deliver, how much we're going to deliver. They're the boss. They run the show. I mean, they even chose and built the sites. One thing that was interesting is that later on a few days into the operations, we started to provide the IDF, like not to the World Food Program or to UNRWA, so the IDF could escort them, or not to Kogat. Kogat is an entity within the Israeli Ministry of Defense. It's a cooperative organization. It's kind of like their version of like a humanitarian aid organization. That we were putting food on trucks for the IDF themselves, without us there, the IDFs themselves, to go into areas to deliver it because it was too dangerous for us. And then that food just disappeared. Like it didn't go to where they said it was going to go. And there was just this kind of this hand wave of like, hey, the 14 trucks that we gave y'all to go deliver this food there, it didn't go there. Like, what happened to it? And they're just like, what trucks? And we're like, and I was like, I was there. What are you talking about? I was there when you left with them. What are you talking about? And they're like, what trucks? And then I get told there were no trucks. And I'm like, wow, we're in this deep when it's just that blatant.